I drove 200 miles to walk my only daughter down the aisle, my tuxedo carefully hung in the back of my old pickup truck. But when I arrived at the gate of the most exclusive wedding venue in Napa Valley, I didn't find a welcoming committee. I found a laminated sign zip-tied to the iron bars. It featured a photo of me in my dirty gardening clothes with bold red letters that read, "Do not let this man in." I stood there stunned as the security guard crossed his arms and looked at me with pity. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just turned around and walked back to my truck in silence. But what my daughter Brittany didn't know was that her happy day was already over. 4 hours later, she would realize that banning me wasn't just an insult to her father. It was a financial death sentence because she had forgotten who actually owned the ground she was standing on. Before I tell you how I shut down a $200,000 wedding with a single phone call, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by your own family. My name is William Carter, but everyone calls me Bill. At 72 years old, I have calluses on my hands that will never go away, and a face weathered by decades of working under the Seattle sun. To the outside world, and apparently to my own daughter, I am just a retired contractor getting by on Social Security, driving a dented 2015 Ford F-150 that sounds like a tractor, and I prefer it that way. I spent 45 years building a construction empire from a single toolbox, pouring concrete framing houses, and eventually developing entire commercial districts. When I retired 5 years ago, I didn't buy a yacht or a mansion. I put my money into quiet, high-yield assets and kept living in my 3-bedroom ranch house. I value privacy over prestige, but today was supposed to be different. Today was Brittany's wedding. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror of the truck. I had shaved, combed my gray hair, and polished my old dress shoes until they shone. I had the tuxedo I bought 10 years ago for my late wife's funeral, hanging in the back seat, freshly dry cleaned. I was ready to be the proud father. I was ready to give her away to Jason Fitzpatrick, a man I didn't particularly like but whom she seemed to love. As I pulled up to the entrance of the Golden Vineyard, I felt a swell of pride. The landscaping was impeccable. The rows of grapevines stretched out like soldiers in the California sun, and the main estate house stood on the hill like a castle. It was a venue fit for royalty, costing upwards of $50,000 just for the rental fee. I rolled down my window as I approached the security checkpoint. A young man in a uniform that looked more expensive than my daily wardrobe stepped out holding a clipboard. "Name?" he asked, not bothering to look me in the eye. "William Carter," I said, smiling. "I am the father of the bride." The guard froze. His eyes snapped up to my face, then darted down to a sheet of paper taped to the inside of his booth. He looked back at me, then at my truck, then at the paper again. His expression shifted from indifference to an awkward, nervous tension. "Sir, I cannot let you in," he said, stepping back and putting a hand on his radio. I chuckled, thinking it was a mistake. "Son, I think you misheard me. I am Brittany Carter's father. I'm here to walk her down the aisle. I'm a little early because I wanted to see her before the ceremony." The guard sighed, walked out of the booth, and pointed to a sign attached to the iron gate that I hadn't noticed from the road. It was about letter-sized, laminated in heavy plastic to withstand the weather. I squinted. It was a photo of me. A terrible, unflattering photo taken from a distance while I was weeding my garden 2 weeks ago. I was wearing my stained overalls, a torn t-shirt, and a bucket hat. Below the photo, in aggressive red block letters, it said, "Strictly prohibited. Do not admit under any circumstances. Police will be called if cited." The air left my lungs. I stared at the sign, feeling a physical blow to my chest. That was my daughter's handwriting. I recognized the way she looped her S. "There must be a mistake," I stammered, my voice sounding weak even to my own ears. "There is no mistake, sir," the guard said, his voice firm. "The instructions from the bride and the groom's family were very specific. They said An elderly man in a beat-up Ford truck might try to crash the event. They said you would claim to be family. I have orders to call the sheriff if you don't turn around right now. I looked past the gate. Up the winding driveway, I could see the white tents, the florists unloading thousands of dollars worth of orchids, the catering trucks preparing for a feast. My daughter was up there. I grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from a cocktail of rage and heartbreak. I dialed Brittany. It went straight to voicemail. I dialed again. Voicemail. She knew I was coming. We had spoken yesterday. She had told me in her sweetest voice, "Daddy, just come around 3. Everything is handled. You just need to show up and look handsome." Was that a lie? Was she planning this while she spoke to me? I scrolled down and found Jason's number, my future son-in-law, the man who called himself a financial consultant, but had never seemed to have a job in the 3 years I had known him. The phone rang 4 times. Then someone picked up. "Hello, Bill." Jason's voice answered. It wasn't warm. It was mocking. In the background, I could hear laughter and the clinking of glasses. "Jason." "I'm at the gate," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The guard won't let me in. There is a sign with my face on it." "What is going on?" There was a pause and then a loud burst of laughter. He had me on speakerphone. "Yeah, Bill. We see you on the security cameras," Jason said, his tone dripping with arrogance. "Look, let's be honest. Brittany and I talked it over with my parents. We can't have you there." "What do you mean you can't have me there when I'm her father?" "Exactly," Jason replied. "And look at you. You're driving a truck that belongs in a junkyard. You probably have dirt under your fingernails right now. My parents, the Fitzpatricks, are inviting senators and investors today. This is a high-class event, Bill. We can't have a blue-collar old man wandering around pretending he belongs. It ruins the aesthetic. The aesthetic. My presence, my 45 years of raising Brittany, of paying for her braces, her college, her first car, all of it was being erased for an aesthetic." "Brittany agrees with this?" I asked, my voice dropping to a growl. "Brittany designed the sign, Bill." Jason laughed. "She didn't want to tell you to your face because she hates confrontation. She figured you'd just get the hint and go home. We told the guests you came down with a sudden flu and couldn't travel. It's cleaner that way." I looked at the gate again. The guard was watching me, hand hovering over his phone, ready to call the police. "So that's it," I said. "I'm just discarded. Don't be dramatic." Jason sighed. "You can still send the wedding gift. We sent you the routing number for the house down payment fund, didn't we? Just transfer the money. We'll send you some photos of the ceremony. Now turn that heap of scrap metal around and get off the property before security impounds it." The line went dead. I sat there in the cab of my truck, the silence of the countryside deafening. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. He was right. There was a little bit of dirt under my thumbnail from my garden. I looked at the passenger seat where a small box sat wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a vintage diamond necklace that had belonged to my mother, Brittany's grandmother. I had planned to give it to her before she walked down the aisle. The pain hit me first, a sharp, agonizing ache in the center of my chest. My little girl. The girl I had carried on my shoulders. The girl who used to run to the door when I came home covered in sawdust. She was ashamed of me. She had banned me like a criminal because I didn't fit the image of the wealthy socialite life she was trying to fake with the Fitzpatricks. But then the pain began to cool. It hardened. It turned into something cold and heavy, like the steel beams I used to hoist into the sky. I remembered the last month, Brittany asking me to sign a withdrawal form for $50,000 from my retirement fund. She said it was for a down payment on a starter home. I gave it to her because I wanted her to be secure. Now I realized that money wasn't for a house. It was for this. For the flowers, the champagne, the orchestra, the show that excluded me. I looked at the guard. I looked at the sign one last time. Strictly prohibited. "Okay," I whispered to the empty cab. You want me gone, I'll be gone. But I'm taking everything that is mine with me. I put the truck in reverse. I didn't make a scene. I didn't scream at the guard. I backed up, calmly turned the wheel, and drove about 100 yards down the road, pulling onto the wide, grassy shoulder, out of sight of the gate, but still within view of the vineyard. I turned off the engine. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old leather and diesel. Then I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out a burner phone I kept for business emergencies. I didn't want them tracking my main line. I dialed a number I knew by heart. "Blackwood," I said when the line connected. "Bill, it's Saturday. Are you at the wedding?" The voice on the other end was sharp, precise. Thomas Blackwood had been my corporate attorney for 30 years. He was the only man who knew exactly what I was worth. "I'm outside the wedding, Thomas. I've been barred from entry." There was a beat of silence. Then a low, dangerous tone entered Blackwood's voice. "Barred by whom? By the bride and groom. They say I don't fit the aesthetic. They think I'm just a poor old contractor who embarrasses them." "I see," Blackwood said. "Do they know?" "No," I interrupted. "They don't know anything. They think this venue, the Golden Vineyard, is owned by a holding company out of Delaware. They don't know that I own the holding company. I bought the Golden Vineyard 5 years ago as a distressed asset. It was a quiet investment. I loved the land. I leased the management out to a luxury hospitality group, but I retained 100% ownership and final executive control. I had arranged for Brittany's wedding to be held here as a gift. I had instructed the management to waive the venue fee, the catering costs, and the alcohol tab, a gift totaling nearly $150,000. I told Brittany I knew the owners and had called in a favor. I wanted to surprise her with the paid-in-full invoice as a wedding present. "Bill, what do you want to do?" Blackwood asked. "Activate Article 17 of the venue contract." I said, my voice flat. Article 17 was a clause I insisted on in every property I leased out. It was the owner's prerogative. It stated that the primary owner could revoke usage rights of the property at any time for any reason, effective immediately provided any deposit was refunded. But there was no deposit. I had waived it. "Are you sure?" Bill Blackwood asked. "This will scorch the earth. It's your daughter. She made her choice, Thomas. She put my face on a wanted poster at the gate of my own property. She treated me like a stray dog." Execute. Article 17. And Thomas, yes. Call the general manager of the resort. Tell him to meet me at the south gate in 3 minutes. Tell him if he doesn't get here, he can start looking for a new job in Alaska. I hung up the phone. I leaned back in my seat and watched a hawk circling overhead. It was hunting. So was I. I wasn't the sad, rejected father anymore. I was William Carter, CEO of Carter Holdings, and I was about to foreclose on my daughter's happiness. 3 minutes later, a golf cart came tearing down the service road inside the fence. It skidded to a halt at the gate. The security guard looked confused as the general manager, a man named Mr. Henderson, jumped out. Henderson was pale. He was sweating despite the mild weather. He spotted my truck on the shoulder and ran towards the gate, waving frantically at the guard to open it. The guard hesitated, pointing at the sign. "Open the damn gate!" Henderson screamed, his voice cracking. "That is the owner." The guard's jaw dropped. He scrambled to unlock the mechanism. The heavy iron gates swung open. I didn't drive in immediately. I let Henderson run up to my window. He was out of breath, terrified. He had never met me in person. We only dealt through Blackwood, but he knew the name. He knew who signed his paychecks. "Mr. Carter, sir." "I am so sorry," Henderson stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. "I had no idea. The bride, she gave us the photo. She said you were a stalker, a dangerous relative. If I had known—" "Stop," I said, raising a hand. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "I want to know the status of the billing for this event." Henderson. Henderson swallowed hard. Sir, as per your instructions from 3 months ago, the entire event is being comped. The venue rental, the 3-course dinner for 200 guests, the open bar, the premium wine selection. It's all marked as complimentary per the owner's request. And has a contract been signed by the couple I asked? Yes, sir. But the financial addendum lists the balance as 0 guaranteed by you. I nodded. Good. Bring me the master invoice. And bring a pen. I don't have it on me, sir. I can run back to the office. You have a tablet, don't you? Bring it here. Henderson fumbled with the iPad he was carrying. He pulled up the billing software. He handed it to me through the window. I looked at the total. $154,320. That included the lobster brought in from Maine, the vintage champagne, the live orchestra, the floral arrangements that cost more than my first house. I tapped the screen. I removed the owner's waiver. The balance shifted from 0 to red. Now I said, handing the tablet back, I am revoking my sponsorship. The waiver is gone. This event is no longer complimentary. Henderson looked at the screen, his eyes widening. Sir. Who is going to pay this? The clients, I said coldly. Mr. Jason Fitzpatrick and Mrs. Brittany Carter. Or perhaps his parents, the wealthy Fitzpatricks. But sir, the reception starts in 20 minutes. The appetizers are already being plated. Then you better hurry, I said. Here are your orders. Listen closely because I will not repeat them. I stared into Henderson's terrified eyes. Freeze everything. Stop the servers. Close the bar. Lock the wine cellar. Turn off the music. Find Jason Fitzpatrick and hand him this bill. Tell him the financial guarantor has withdrawn support due to a violation of the conduct policy. Tell him the total amount is due immediately in full. And if they can't pay, Henderson whispered. Then kick them out, I said. You have 30 minutes. If I hear a single violin playing in 31 minutes, Henderson, I will shut this entire resort down and liquidate it. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Crystal clear, sir. Go. Henderson ran back to his golf cart like the devil was chasing him. He sped back up the hill towards the white tents. I rolled up my window. I sat there watching the distant figures of guests mingling on the lawn. They looked so happy, so carefree. They were drinking my wine, standing on my grass, laughing at the poor old man who wasn't allowed in. I picked up my thermos of coffee and poured a cup. It was lukewarm, but it tasted good. I watched the clock on the dashboard. 12:00 p.m. The show was about to start. Up on the hill, I could see a sudden commotion near the main tent. A group of waiters who were walking out with silver trays suddenly stopped, turned around, and walked back into the kitchen. The music, a string quartet playing Vivaldi, cut out mid-note. It was silent. Then I saw a figure in a white dress storming out of the tent, followed by a man in a black tuxedo. Even from this distance, I could see Brittany's frantic gestures. She was yelling at someone, probably Henderson. My phone rang. It was Jason. I let it ring. It rang again. Brittany. I let it ring. I wasn't ready to talk yet. I wanted them to sweat. I wanted them to feel the cold, hard reality of the world they thought they were too good for. They wanted to live in a world of elites. Well, in the world of elites, bills have to be paid. I took a sip of coffee and waited for the dominoes to fall. The view from here was spectacular. I watched the digital clock on my dashboard flick from 12:01 to 12:02. The silence in the cab of my truck was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the engine cooling down. Outside, the heat waves were starting to rise off the asphalt, distorting the view of the manicured grapevines that stretched endlessly toward the main estate. I didn't have to wait long. The sound of an electric motor whining at maximum capacity cut through the air. A white golf cart emblazoned with the Golden Vineyard logo came careening around the bend of the service road inside the gate. It was moving so fast I thought it might tip over on the gravel turn. The driver was gripping the roof support with one hand and the steering wheel with the other, his knuckles white. It was Henderson. He skidded to a halt on the other side of the iron gate, dust billowing up around his polished dress shoes as he practically fell out of the cart. He didn't look like the composed, arrogant general manager I had read about in the quarterly reports. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on a trapdoor. He scrambled toward the gate, fumbling with a keycard on a lanyard around his neck. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped it twice before finally getting the sensor to beep. The heavy iron gates groaned and began to swing open, but Henderson didn't wait. He squeezed through the opening gap, panting, his face flushed a deep, unhealthy shade of crimson. I didn't get out of the truck. I sat there, my arm resting on the open window frame, watching him run toward me. He stopped a few feet away, chest heaving, his eyes darting from my face to the sign zip-tied to the gate, and then back to me. He looked terrified. "Mr. Carter," he wheezed, pulling a silk handkerchief from his pocket to mop his forehead. "Sir, I am so incredibly sorry. I had no idea. The instructions we received, they were so specific. They told us—" He stopped, swallowing hard, as he looked at the sign again. "They told you I was a stalker, didn't they?" "Henderson," I asked calmly. My voice was low, devoid of any emotion. I saw him flinch. "Yes, sir," he whispered. "The bride, Miss Carter, she came to my office personally last week. She provided the photo. She said you were an estranged relative with a history of mental instability and violence. She said you might try to disrupt the ceremony to extort money. She insisted on the sign. She said it was necessary for the safety of her guests." I nodded slowly. Estranged relative. Mental instability. Extortion. My own daughter had painted me as a criminal to keep her embarrassing blue-collar father away from her high society fantasy. She hadn't just uninvited me. She had assassinated my character to my own employees. The last shred of guilt I felt for what I was about to do evaporated instantly. It was replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. "That is a very creative story, Henderson," I said. "But as you can see, the only thing I am here to extort is a little bit of respect. And since that seems to be in short supply, we are going to talk about business." I opened the truck door and stepped out. Henderson instinctively took a step back. I stood a full head taller than him, and despite my 72 years, I was built from decades of hauling lumber and pouring concrete. I walked around to the front of my truck and leaned against the hood, crossing my arms. "Do you have the master tablet?" I asked. Henderson nodded frantically, clutching an iPad to his chest like a shield. "Yes, sir. I brought everything. The entire event file." "Bring it here," I commanded. He stepped forward, his movements jerky and nervous, and handed me the device. I unlocked the screen. The financial breakdown for the wedding was dazzling in its excess. I scrolled through the line items. Imported white truffles. A 12-piece string orchestra flown in from San Francisco. A custom dance floor built over the swimming pool. Cases of vintage champagne that cost more than my first car. The total at the bottom was staggering. $154,320. And right below the total in green letters was the status line. Paid in full via owner equity waiver. I tapped the screen, my finger hovering over the authorization code. I looked at Henderson. "You know who authorized this waiver, don't you, Henderson?" "You did, sir," he replied, his voice trembling. "You sent the directive 3 months ago. You said to give the couple whatever they wanted. The diamond package. No limits." "That's right," I said. "I wanted to give my daughter the wedding of her dreams. I wanted to surprise her. I was going to hand her the receipt marked paid as a gift. But it seems my gift isn't good enough for her aesthetic. It seems I am just a security risk." I pressed the edit button on the screen. I highlighted the owner equity waiver, and then with a single tap, I deleted it. The screen refreshed. The green status line turned a bright, angry red. Balance due $154,320,000. Payment status overdue. Immediate action required. I handed the tablet back to Henderson. He looked at the screen and audibly gasped. "Sir," he stammered, looking up at me with wide eyes. This voids the contract. The event insurance requires full payment 48 hours prior to commencement. If there is no payment on file, we are in breach of our own liability protocols. We can't host an event of this magnitude without a financial guarantor." "Exactly," I said. "And since I am no longer the guarantor, you have a problem. You have 200 guests drinking your wine and eating your food on an event that is technically unauthorized and uninsured. But sir, the reception has already started. The appetizers are being served. The main course is in the ovens." "Then you better move fast," I said, turning to look up the hill toward the white tents fluttering in the breeze. "I want you to go up there, Henderson. I want you to find the groom, Jason Fitzpatrick. Do not speak to my daughter. She is too emotional. Speak to Jason. Show him this screen. Tell him there has been an administrative error regarding the sponsorship. Tell him the financial backer has withdrawn support due to a violation of the conduct clause." "Conduct clause?" Henderson asked, confused. "Yes," I said, pointing to the sign on the gate. "Harassment of the owner. Defamation of character. Creating a hostile work environment for my security staff by forcing them to police my own property against me. I think that covers it." I leaned in closer to him. "Tell Jason the bill is due now. Immediately. In full. Credit card wire transfer or cash. I don't care how he gets it. But if that balance isn't cleared in 30 minutes, you are to shut it down." "Shut it down," Henderson whispered, the color draining from his face. Everything I said, my voice hard as granite. "Stop the music. Clear the tables. Lock the bar. Escort the guests off the property. If they refuse to pay, this becomes a trespassing situation." And Henderson. "Yes, sir, if you try to cut them a deal, if you try to float them a line of credit, if you serve one more glass of my champagne without payment, you will be fired before the sun goes down. And I will ensure you never manage so much as a motel again." "Do I make myself clear?" "Crystal clear, sir," he said, his voice barely a squeak. "Good. Now I need you to sign this." I reached into the bed of my truck and pulled out a clipboard with a document I had prepared with Blackwood just minutes ago. It was a formal revocation of financial surety. I slammed it down on the hood of my truck. The metal groaned under the force. I pulled a pen from my pocket and held it out to him. "Sign it," I ordered. "Acknowledge that you have received the order to cease operations unless payment is rendered." Henderson stepped up to the hood of my dirty, dented Ford F-150. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold the pen. He signed his name at the bottom of the page, the ink stark and dark against the white paper. He was signing the death warrant of the biggest event of his career, and he knew it. I took the clipboard back. I checked the time on my watch. 12:15. "You have until 12:45, Henderson. I suggest you take the golf cart. It's a long walk up that hill." Henderson didn't wait for another word. He scrambled back into his cart, almost tripping over his own feet. He slammed his foot on the accelerator, the tires spinning on the gravel before finding traction. He sped off toward the estate house, a white blur of panic racing against the clock. I watched him go. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel satisfaction. I just felt a cold, hollow resolve. They wanted a show. They were about to get one. I reached into my cooler and pulled out a sandwich I had packed for lunch. I unwrapped the foil. It was ham and cheese. Simple. Honest. I took a bite and leaned against my truck, my eyes fixed on the distant party. Up on the hill, the music was drifting down the valley. A classical piece. Something elegant and expensive. It sounded like money burning. I saw Henderson's cart reach the main tent. I saw him jump out and run toward the entrance, waving his arms at the head of catering. I saw the maitre d' stop in his tracks. The first domino had just been pushed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Blackwood. "It's done on my end," the message read. Corporate accounts frozen for the event code. Liability insurance pulled. You are legally bulletproof, Bill. I put the phone away. 30 minutes. That was all they had. 30 minutes to come up with $150,000 or face the humiliation of a lifetime. I knew Jason's finances. I had run a background check on him when he first started dating Brittany. The man leased his BMW. He carried 5 maxed-out credit cards. He didn't have $5,000 to his name, let alone $150,000. And his parents, the illustrious Fitzpatricks, they were leveraged to the hilt, living on loans and appearances. They were about to hit a wall at 100 miles an hour. I took another bite of my sandwich. The bread was a little dry, but I didn't mind. It tasted like reality. And reality was coming for my daughter fast. Inside the massive climate-controlled tent, the air smelled of expensive perfume wild orchids and the buttery richness of lobster bisque being ladled into porcelain bowls. 200 guests sat at round tables draped in silk linens that shimmered under the crystal chandeliers suspended from the canopy. It was a scene of absolute perfection, a masterpiece of social engineering designed to announce to the world that Brittany Carter and Jason Fitzpatrick were royalty. At the head table sat my daughter. She looked radiant, her smile practiced and bright, as she leaned over to whisper something to Jason. He was laughing, holding a glass of 20-year-old scotch, swirling the amber liquid with the casual arrogance of a man who has never had to work for his luxury. To his right sat his parents, the Fitzpatricks, holding court with a state senator and a couple of venture capitalists. Mrs. Fitzpatrick was gesturing with a fork encrusted with diamonds, pointing out the view of the vineyard through the open flaps of the tent, bragging about how hard it was to secure this specific venue on a Saturday in June. She didn't mention that it was free. She let the guests believe her family's prestige had simply opened the doors. The string quartet was playing a soaring rendition of Canon in D, providing a lush soundtrack to the clinking of silverware and the murmur of polite, wealthy conversation. Waiters in white gloves moved like ghosts between the tables, pouring wine that cost $300 a bottle. It was a symphony of excess, and for a few minutes it was exactly the fantasy my daughter had sold her soul to achieve. Then the ecosystem broke. It started near the kitchen entrance. The double doors swung open, not with the rhythmic grace of service, but with a violent urgency. Henderson burst into the room. He was no longer the composed figure of authority the guests had seen earlier. His tie was askew, his face was slick with sweat, and his eyes were wide with panic. He didn't walk, he ran. He made a beeline for the head waiter, a tall man named Claude, who was currently overseeing the pouring of the champagne toast. I wasn't there to hear the whisper, but I saw the reaction. Claude dropped the bottle he was holding. It didn't break on the carpet, but the thud was heavy enough to turn heads at the nearest table. Henderson grabbed Claude by the shoulder and barked an order that made the head waiter flinch, as if he had been slapped. Claude raised his hand and snapped his fingers. It was a sharp cutting sound that sliced through the ambient noise. The effect was instantaneous and brutal. Every waiter in the room froze. Then, as if choreographed by a sadist, they all moved at once. A young server who was about to place a plate of filet mignon in front of the senator pulled the plate back. The senator blinked, reaching for his fork, only to find empty air. At the bar, the mixologists stopped shaking martinis mid-rhythm. They set the shakers down and turned their backs to the guests, crossing their arms. But the most shocking moment happened at the tables. The servers didn't just stop serving, they began to confiscate. A waiter moved to Mrs. Fitzpatrick's side. With a blank professional expression, he reached out and took the half-full glass of wine from her hand. "Excuse me," she gasped, her voice shrill with indignation. "What on earth do you think you are doing?" The waiter didn't answer. He placed the glass on his tray, moved to Mr. Fitzpatrick, took his scotch, and then moved to the next guest. All around the room, the sound of laughter was replaced by the clinking of glass against metal as drinks were removed with ruthless efficiency. Then the music died. Henderson had reached the small stage where the quartet was playing. He waved his arms frantically. The cellist looked up startled, and his bow screeched across the strings, a discordant wail that sounded like a dying animal. The music stopped abruptly, leaving a vacuum of silence that was heavier than the humid air. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The silence was absolute. 200 people holding their breath, confused, waiting for the punchline or the explanation. Then Brittany stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the parquet dance floor. She looked furious. Her perfect day, her aesthetic was unraveling, and she didn't understand why. She smoothed her dress and glared at Henderson, who was standing in the center of the room, panting. "What is going on?" she demanded, her voice projecting clearly across the silent tent. "Why has the music stopped? Where is the main course?" Henderson didn't cower. He couldn't afford to. He had my signature on a piece of paper that was essentially a gun to his head. He straightened his jacket, took a deep breath, and walked toward the head table. He didn't look like a servant anymore. He looked like an executioner. Mrs. Fitzpatrick stood up as well, her face flushing a deep purple. "This is outrageous," she sputtered. "We are personal friends of the owners. I will have you fired for this incompetence. Bring the wine back immediately." Henderson ignored her. He walked right past the parents and stopped in front of Jason and Brittany. He held the iPad against his chest for a moment, as if using it as a shield. "Mr. Fitzpatrick." "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice shaking, but loud enough for the first 3 tables to hear. "I have been ordered to cease all operations immediately." Brittany laughed. It was a high, nervous sound. "Cease operations? What are you talking about? This is a wedding. You can't just stop a wedding. We have a contract." Henderson nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am, we do have a contract. And that contract has a financial stipulation regarding payment." He turned the iPad around and thrust it toward Jason. The screen was bright red. The numbers were large and unforgiving. $154,320. Due now. Jason looked at the screen. He blinked. He looked at Henderson, then at Brittany, then back at the screen. He let out a weak, confused chuckle. "I don't understand," Jason said, loosening his bow tie as sweat began to bead on his forehead. "This was taken care of. The sponsorship. The waiver. It was all handled months ago." "The waiver has been revoked," Sir Henderson said flatly. "The financial guarantor has withdrawn their support effective immediately." "Withdrawn," Brittany screamed. She grabbed the iPad from Jason's hands, her manicured nails tapping furiously on the glass. "Who withdrew it? Who is doing this?" "The owner of the estate," Henderson replied. He cited a violation of the conduct clause, specifically harassment and defamation of character. Brittany froze. Her eyes went wide. She looked toward the entrance of the tent, toward the gate far down the hill. For a split second, the realization hit her. The sign, the photo, the ban. She knew exactly who she had insulted. She knew exactly who she had barred from entry. But she couldn't say it. She couldn't admit to the room full of elites that the mysterious wealthy owner who had gifted them this wedding was actually the father she had just publicly shamed as a poor embarrassment. Admitting that would be social suicide. So she pivoted. She turned her rage on Henderson. "This is a mistake," she hissed. "A computer error. Fix it. Turn the music back on. Serve the food. We will sort this out on Monday." "I cannot do that, ma'am," Henderson said, stepping back. "My orders are absolute. Unless this balance is paid in full right now, I have to clear the venue. This event is currently uninsured and unauthorized." Mrs. Fitzpatrick chimed in, her voice dripping with venom. "This is extortion. We are not paying a dime until we speak to your superiors. Jason, call your lawyers." Jason fumbled for his phone, but his hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. He looked at his mother, his eyes pleading. "Mom, I don't know what to do." "Pay the bill," Brittany snapped at him. Jason, just pay it. Use the corporate card. Use anything. Just make him go away. Jason looked at her, and the illusion of his success evaporated in an instant. Brittany, honey, the card has a limit of 5,000. You know that. A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. The investors, the senator, the wealthy friends, they were all watching. They were watching the golden couple crumble over a bill. They were watching the facade crack. Then use your parents' cards, Brittany yelled, pointing at the elder Fitzpatricks. Mr. Fitzpatrick coughed, clearing his throat and adjusting his cufflinks. Now hold on a moment. We are currently shifting assets. Our liquidity is tied up in overseas markets. We cannot simply swipe a card for $150,000 on a Saturday. The silence that followed was excruciating. Henderson took the iPad back. He looked at the time. You have 20 minutes remaining, he said, his voice gaining confidence as he realized these people were powerless. If the balance is not cleared, the sheriff's department will be called to assist with the eviction. Eviction. The word hung in the air like smoke. Brittany looked around the room. She looked at the guests who were now standing up, gathering their purses, whispering behind their hands. She looked at the waiters who stood like stone statues guarding the wine. She looked at the lobster bisque getting cold on the serving stations. You are ruining my day, she sobbed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. You are ruining everything. I am just the messenger, ma'am, Henderson said. The owner was very clear. He said, if you wanted an aesthetic, you have to pay for it. That was the dagger. Brittany gasped. She knew I had said that. She knew I was down there at the gate watching. She grabbed a glass of water from the table and threw it. It shattered against the floor, spraying water and glass shards over the hem of her $10,000 dress. Get out, she screamed. Get out of my face! Henderson didn't flinch. He checked his watch again. 19 minutes, he said. He turned and walked away, signaling to the staff. The waiters began to clear the tables, not of empty plates, but of full ones. They picked up the chargers, the silverware, the centerpieces. They were dismantling the wedding piece by piece right in front of the guests' eyes. The string quartet began to pack up their instruments, snapping the latches on their cases with loud clicks. The sound was final. Jason sat down heavily in his chair, his head in his hands. His mother was frantically typing on her phone, probably trying to transfer money that didn't exist. His father was staring at the tablecloth, looking gray. And Brittany stood alone in the center of the chaos, watching her dream wedding being repossessed. She looked toward the entrance, toward the hill that led down to the gate. I wasn't there, but I knew she could feel my gaze. She knew I was the one pulling the strings. She had banned the man in the dirty truck, but she had forgotten that the man in the dirty truck built the foundation she was standing on. The chaos was just beginning, and the bill was still due. The phone on the dashboard buzzed again, violently against the hard plastic of the center console. It was a vibration that seemed to shake the entire cabin of the truck. The screen lit up, flashing the word "daughter" in bright white letters against a black background. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. I looked at the caller ID and felt a phantom ache in my hand, the ghost of the thousands of times I had answered that call, to fix a flat tire, to wire cash for a forgotten bill, to soothe a broken heart. For 28 years, that ringtone had been my command to serve. Not today. Today it was the sound of a trap snapping shut. I let it ring 3 times. I wanted her to feel the empty space on the line. I wanted her to look at her phone screen up there in that tent and wonder for the first time in her life if I was actually going to answer. I wanted her to feel the panic of silence. On the 4th ring, I slid my thumb across the glass and put it on speaker. I didn't say hello. I didn't say a word. I just listened. Daddy, her voice shrieked through the speakers, distorted by rage and static. It was a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. It wasn't the voice of a bride on her wedding day. It was the voice of a spoiled child who had just been told no for the first time in history. "Daddy, fix this right now. Do you hear me? Henderson is taking the wine away. He is literally taking bottles off the tables. People are staring. Jason is hyperventilating in the bathroom. You have to call the owner. You told me you knew the owner. Call him and tell him to stop this madness immediately." I took a slow sip of my coffee. I looked up the hill. I could see her silhouette pacing frantically near the edge of the terrace, phone pressed to her ear, her other hand flailing in the air. "I can't do that, Brittany," I said calmly. My voice was steady, deep, the voice of a man who has poured concrete foundations that hold up skyscrapers. It was immovable. "What do you mean you can't?" she screamed. "You promised. You said you pulled strings. You said it was a gift. This is my day. My special day. You are humiliating me. Do you know who is here? The senator is here. Jason's investors are here. Fix it." "I'm afraid the owner is quite upset," I said. "He has a strict policy about how his guests treat him." "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "I haven't even met the owner. I haven't done anything to him." "Oh, but you have," I replied. "You printed a picture of him. You laminated it. You zip-tied it to the front gate of his property with a warning to call the police if he dared to show his face. You told his employees he was unstable. You told them he was an embarrassment." There was a silence on the line. It was heavy and thick. Up on the hill, I saw her silhouette freeze. "The owner," she whispered, the realization seeping into her voice like poison water. "You. It's you." "It's me," I confirmed. "I bought the Golden Vineyard 5 years ago, Brittany. I bought it with the money I made getting dirt under my fingernails. The same dirt you were so afraid would ruin your aesthetic today." The shock lasted only a second, before it was replaced by a tidal wave of entitlement. "You own this place," she shouted, her voice rising an octave. "You own a $20 million vineyard and you drive that truck. You own this place and you let me stress about money for months. You are sick. You are twisted. If you own it, then tell them to turn the music back on. Stop being petty and let me have my wedding." "I'm not being petty, Brittany," I said. "I am being a businessman. And in business, when a client defaults on payment and insults the proprietor, the contract is void." "I didn't default," she yelled. "You said it was free." "It was free," I corrected her. "It was a gift for a daughter I thought respected me. But gifts can be returned. And frankly, I don't give gifts to people who ban me from the premises. This isn't about the sign," she hissed. "You are just mad because you didn't get to walk me down the aisle. You are making this about your ego. You are selfish. You have always been selfish with your money, hoarding it while Jason and I struggle." I gripped the steering wheel. The leather creaked under my hands. Selfish. The word hung in the air, tasting of ash. "Selfish," I repeated quietly. "Let's talk about selfish Brittany. Let's talk about last month." "I don't want to talk about the past. I want the champagne back," she interrupted. "We are going to talk about it," I said, my voice rising, cutting over her like a chainsaw. "We are going to talk about that Tuesday night you came to my house crying. You sat at my kitchen table. You held my hand. You told me Jason's firm was restructuring. You told me the housing market was impossible. You told me you found a perfect starter home, a foreclosure, but you needed a cash down payment immediately or you would lose it." She went silent. "I remember the tears, Brittany," I continued. "They looked very real. You asked me for $50,000. You knew that was my emergency fund. You knew that was the money I set aside for medical bills so I wouldn't be a burden to you when I got old. But I signed the check. I signed it because I thought I was buying you security. I thought I was putting a roof over my daughter's head." "That was for our future," she mumbled defensively. "Don't lie to me," I roared. It came out louder than I intended, startling a bird off the fence post nearby. I saw the credit card statements, Brittany. I have friends in banking. I know where that money went. You didn't buy a house. You and Jason are still renting that overpriced apartment downtown. That $50,000 didn't go to equity. It went to the first-class upgrade for your flight to Bora Bora. It went to the deposit on that $12,000 dress you are wearing right now. It went to the custom silk invitations that you didn't even send to me. I took a breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. You stole from my retirement to play princess, I said, my voice dropping to a cold whisper. You looked me in the eye, you cried about being homeless, and you took my safety net to buy luxury. And then when the day came to celebrate, you decided the man who paid for the dress wasn't good enough to see it. That is different, she cried, her voice sounding small and desperate for the first time. We needed the honeymoon. We needed to network. Jason needs to look successful to get clients. You don't understand how our world works. Appearances are everything. I understand perfectly, I said. And now I am helping you with your appearance. I am showing your friends, your senator, and your investors exactly what lies beneath the surface. You wanted to look rich. Well, rich people pay their bills. Daddy, please, she sobbed. Jason's parents are furious. They are saying they are going to sue. They are saying you are ruining their reputation. Tell the Fitzpatricks that if they want to sue, they are welcome to try, I said. But tell them I have the credit report. I ran on them yesterday. I know they are leveraged to the hilt. I know their house in the Hamptons is in foreclosure. I know they are pushing Jason to marry you because they think I have a secret fortune they can tap into. I paused, letting the weight of that sink in. Well, they were right about one thing, Brittany. I do have a fortune, but the bank is closed. Please, she begged. Just turn the music back on. I'll let you come in. I'll tear down the sign. I'll let you sit at the head table. I'll even dance with you. Just fix it. It was the bargaining phase. She was trying to sell me my own dignity back to me. She thought that a dance with her father was a currency she could trade for a $150,000 party. It is too late for that, I said. The staff has their orders. The insurance is pulled. If I let you continue, I am liable. And I am done being liable for you. You are ruining my life, she screamed, the mask of sadness slipping back into pure rage. You are a bitter, jealous old man. I hate you. I looked at the sign on the gate one last time. The red letters, the unflattering photo, the command to keep me out. You didn't want me there, Brittany, I said softly. You made that very clear. You wanted my money, but you didn't want the man who earned it. You wanted the fairy tale, but you didn't want the carpenter who built the castle. I started the engine of the truck. The rumble of the diesel engine vibrated through the phone line. So I am granting your wish, I said. I am leaving. And since I am the one who pays for everything, the one who guarantees your loans, the one who covers your rent when Jason forgets, the one who paid for this wedding, well, logic dictates that if I go, the money goes with me. What, no, Daddy, wait. You banned me, Brittany, I said, my hand on the gear shift. You banned me from the premises. So I am taking my wallet and I am going home. I hung up the phone. I didn't block her number. I wanted to see the notifications. I wanted to see the desperation. But I wasn't going to answer again. I tossed the burner phone onto the passenger seat next to the silver-wrapped box containing the diamond necklace. It looked like a small, shiny tombstone for the relationship we used to have. I checked my side mirrors. The road was clear. I pulled the truck onto the asphalt and began the drive back to the highway. I didn't look back at the vineyard. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening. The chaos was spreading like wildfire up that hill. The waiters were stripping the tables. The guests were fleeing to their cars to avoid the awkwardness. And my daughter was standing in the ruins of her vanity, realizing that the check had finally bounced. I drove toward Seattle. I had a meeting with Blackwood on Monday morning. We had a lot of paperwork to do. There were trusts to revoke. wills to rewrite, and a house deed to transfer. Brittany thought the wedding was the end of the story. She didn't realize it was just the opening statement. The trial was just beginning. The drive from the vineyard to downtown San Francisco usually takes an hour, but I made it to the financial district in 45 minutes. My hands were steady on the wheel of my truck, but my blood was boiling with a cold, controlled fury. I didn't go home. Home was for people who had nothing left to do but mourn. I had work to do. I pulled into the underground parking garage of the Blackwood Tower, a steel and glass monolith that housed the most ruthless corporate attorneys on the West Coast. The valet looked at my dusty Ford F-150 with a sneer, but when I handed him a $100 bill and flashed my building access card, his attitude adjusted immediately. Money has a way of fixing vision problems. I took the private elevator up to the 42nd floor. The doors slid open to reveal the reception area of Blackwood and Associates. It was silent, cool, and smelled of old money and mahogany. Thomas Blackwood was waiting for me in the main conference room. He didn't say a word when I walked in. He just poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a crystal glass and slid it across the polished table. I took it and sat down. On the table in front of us was a thick stack of documents. It was the result of a comprehensive forensic accounting investigation I had ordered 3 days ago. At the time, I felt guilty about doing it. I felt like a paranoid old man invading my daughter's privacy. Now, looking at that stack of papers, I realized it wasn't paranoia. It was intuition. My phone rang again. It was Brittany's number, but when I answered, I didn't hear my daughter's voice. I heard a sound like a circular saw cutting through sheet metal. "Listen to me, you miserable little man." It was Mrs. Fitzpatrick, Jason's mother, the woman who claimed to be descended from European aristocracy, the woman who had spent the last year looking down her nose at my flannel shirts and work boots. I put the phone on the table and tapped the speaker button so Blackwood could hear. I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. "You have made a grave mistake, William," she hissed. Her voice was trembling with a mixture of rage and what sounded like gin. "Do you have any idea who we are? Do you know the connections the Fitzpatrick family holds in this state? You have humiliated us in front of a senator. You have ruined a social event that will be talked about for years. I will sue you for every penny of your pathetic retirement savings. I will take your truck. I will take your little house. I will leave you destitute in the street." I took a sip of whiskey. The burn was pleasant. "Are you done, Mrs. Fitzpatrick?" I asked calmly. "I am just getting started," she screamed. "You think because you own a piece of dirt in Napa that you have power. You are nothing. You are a laborer, a ditch digger. My son Jason is marrying down by taking your daughter. We were doing you a favor by letting her into our lineage. And this is how you repay us, by pulling a stunt with the bill." Blackwood raised an eyebrow at me. He was taking notes on a legal pad, his face impassive. "Mrs. Fitzpatrick," I said, my voice low, "I suggest you check your email in about 5 minutes." "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "I am talking about the truth," I said. "You see, I might be a ditch digger, but I know how to dig deep. And I found what you buried." I hung up the phone before she could respond. I didn't want to hear her voice anymore. I wanted to see her destruction. I looked at Blackwood. "Is it verified?" Every line, Thomas said, tapping the stack of papers. "It is worse than we thought, Bill. It is a house of cards built on a swamp." I pulled the dossier toward me. I opened the first page. It was a credit report for Jason Fitzpatrick Sr. and Meredith Fitzpatrick. The numbers were staggering. To the outside world, they were the Fitzpatricks of the Hamptons and Nob Hill. They drove Bentleys. They wore Rolexes. They wintered in Aspen. But on paper, in black and white, they were a financial tragedy. $3 million in debt. I turned the page. Their primary residence in the Hamptons wasn't owned. It was a rental, and they were 6 months behind on the lease. The property they claimed to own in San Francisco was actually held by a shell company that was currently in bankruptcy proceedings. They had 5 mortgages on 3 different properties that were all underwater. They had maxed out 12 credit cards. They had taken out predatory loans with interest rates that should be illegal. They were broke, completely and utterly destitute. I looked at Jason's file. It was even more pathetic. He claimed to be a wealth management consultant, but he didn't have a single client. His license had lapsed 2 years ago. His BMW was leased in his mother's name, and that lease was in default. He had $50,000 in credit card debt, mostly spent on designer clothes and bottle service at clubs. This wasn't a marriage. It was a merger of deficits. But then I found the smoking gun. On page 15, there was a series of emails between Jason and his mother. Blackwood's investigator had done a thorough job. The emails were dated 6 months ago, right around the time Jason proposed to Brittany. One email from Mrs. Fitzpatrick read, "We need this liquidity, Jason. The banks are closing in. If you don't lock this girl down, we are going to lose the cars. Her father is sitting on that development land in Seattle. It has to be worth $5 million at least. Once you are married, we can leverage that asset for a bridge loan." I felt a cold chill settle in my stomach. It wasn't love. It wasn't even social climbing. It was a heist. They thought I still owned the 10 acres of waterfront property in Seattle where I used to store my heavy equipment. It was a prime piece of real estate, the kind developers would kill for. They had done their homework, but their homework was outdated. They didn't know I had sold that land 6 months ago. I hadn't kept the money. I hadn't bought a yacht. I had donated the entire $5 million proceeds to a housing charity for veterans. The tax write-off was nice, but the feeling of giving back to the men who built this country was better. The Fitzpatricks were chasing a ghost. They were marrying my daughter to get their hands on a fortune that had already been given away. And Brittany, my poor, foolish daughter, she had no idea. She thought she was marrying into American royalty. She thought she was securing her future. In reality, she was marrying into a debt trap that would have drowned her before her first anniversary. They weren't just insulting me, I realized. They were hunting me. They banned me from the wedding, not just because I looked poor, but because they wanted to keep me away from the other guests. They didn't want anyone asking the contractor questions. They wanted to control the narrative until the marriage license was signed, and my assets became marital property by proxy. I looked up at Blackwood. "They are waiting for the land," I said. "Yes," Thomas replied. "They have already drafted loan applications using that land as collateral. Jason forged your signature on a letter of intent. It is right here." He slid a document across the table. It was a clumsy forgery, but good enough to fool a desperate lender. It was a promise to transfer the deed of the Seattle property to Brittany upon her marriage. "This is fraud," I said. "It is," Thomas agreed. "Federal fraud. We can have them arrested right now." "No," I said. "Not yet. Arresting them is too easy. It gives them an excuse. They will play the victim. They will say it was a misunderstanding. I want to destroy their credibility first. I want to strip them naked in front of the very people they are trying to impress." I pulled my laptop out of my bag. I opened my email client. I composed a new message. To Jason Fitzpatrick. CC Brittany Carter, Meredith Fitzpatrick, Jason Fitzpatrick Sr. Subject: the dowry you were expecting. I attached the full credit dossier. I attached the foreclosure notices on their Hamptons rental. I attached the bankruptcy filings for their shell companies. And finally, I attached the deed of sale for the Seattle land, showing a sale price of $5 million and a donation receipt for the same amount dated 6 months prior. I typed a short message in the body of the email. Jason, I understand you and your parents are currently experiencing some cash flow issues regarding the wedding bill. I thought this information might help you understand why I am not going to bail you out. Also, regarding the Seattle land you were planning to leverage for your loans, please see the attached donation receipt. The well is dry, son. Welcome to the family. P.S. Tell your mother she has nice taste in gin. I hovered my mouse over the send button. This was it. This was the moment I severed the tie completely. Sending this email wasn't just exposing them, it was ending my relationship with my daughter. She would never forgive me for humiliating her husband. She would never forgive me for letting her dream collapse. But then I remembered the sign. Do not let this man in. I remembered the $50,000 she stole from my retirement. I remembered the look on her face when she asked me for money, crying crocodile tears while planning a vacation to Bora Bora. She needed to learn. Pain is a teacher. And today, class was in session. I clicked send. The email whooshed away instantly, traveling through the fiber optic cables, crossing the miles back to Napa Valley, arriving in the pocket of a tuxedo jacket worn by a man who was currently trying to figure out how to pay a $150,000 bill. I sat back in the leather chair. Now we wait, I said to Blackwood. How long do you think Thomas asked, checking his watch? 2 minutes, I said. Jason is glued to his phone right now trying to move money. He will see the notification. It took less than 2 minutes. 90 seconds later, my phone lit up. It wasn't a call. It was a text from Jason. Just one word. Wait. Then another text. Please. And then the phone started ringing. It was Jason. I declined the call. Then Brittany called. I declined the call. Then Mrs. Fitzpatrick called. I declined the call. I imagined the scene inside that tent. The notification popping up on Jason's screen. The blood draining from his face as he opened the attachment. The frantic scrolling through pages of his own financial failures. The realization that I knew everything. That I knew about the debts, the lies, the forgeries. And the crushing blow of seeing the donation receipt. The realization that the golden goose they were trying to pluck was actually a hawk. I looked at Blackwood. It is done, I said. The rats are turning on each other right now. What is the next move? Bill Thomas asked. The next move is the house, I said. My house. The 3-bedroom ranch in Seattle where Brittany grew up. The house she assumed she would inherit. The house she had already listed as a future asset on her loan applications. She thinks she has a safety net, I said. She thinks even if the wedding fails, she can always come back to the family home. She thinks she can move Jason in and wait for me to die. I reached into my bag and pulled out another folder. Transfer the deed, I said. Thomas looked at the file. To whom? To the shelter, I said. The Canine Rescue League. I want that house signed over to the dogs, effective immediately. I will pay rent to the shelter to live there until I pass, but the ownership transfers today, Bill Thomas said softly. That is the house she was born in, and it is the house she disrespected, I said. She stole from the man who built it. She banned him from her life, so I am banning her from his legacy. Sign it over, Thomas. I want the paperwork filed before the courthouse closes. Thomas nodded. He didn't argue. He knew me well enough to know that once I poured the concrete, it was set forever. I stood up and walked to the window looking out over the city. I felt lighter. The burden of being the provider, the protector, the bank account. It was gone. I was just Bill again. Down in Napa, the sun was high in the sky, but for the Fitzpatricks and the Carters, it was midnight. The darkness had arrived, and they had no one to blame but themselves. I checked my phone one last time. A new email from Jason. Mr. Carter, we can explain. It was a misunderstanding. My parents are just stressed. Please don't do this. We can work out a payment plan. I didn't reply. There was no payment plan for betrayal. The interest rate was too high. I turned back to Blackwood. I am going to get a steak dinner, I said. You want to come? Thomas smiled. I think you earned it, Bill. We walked out of the office, leaving the phones ringing on the conference table, leaving the dossier open to the page that showed a balance of negative $3 million. The wedding was over. The marriage was dead on arrival. And I was hungry. The silence inside the white tent was no longer the silence of confusion. It was the silence of execution. Jason Fitzpatrick stood frozen next to the head table, his hand gripping his smartphone so tightly his knuckles were white. The blue light from the screen illuminated his face, which had gone the color of old ash. He wasn't looking at his bride. He wasn't looking at his parents. He was staring into the abyss of his own financial ruin. I had timed the email perfectly. The notification had pinged just as the waiters were stripping the tablecloths from the tables near the entrance. Jason read the subject line, "The dowry you were expecting." He opened the attachment. I wasn't there, but I knew exactly what he saw. He saw the credit report I had pulled on his parents, showing the $3 million in delinquent loans. He saw the foreclosure notice on the Hamptons estate dated 3 weeks prior. He saw the bankruptcy filings for his own shell company. But the blow that truly killed him was the last document, the donation receipt. $5 million worth of prime Seattle real estate signed over to a charity for veterans 6 months ago. The bridge loan he had been counting on was dead. The collateral he had promised his predatory lenders didn't exist. He was standing at the altar of a wedding he couldn't pay for marrying a woman who brought nothing to the table but debt. Jason looked up. His eyes met Brittany's. She was still crying, still trying to order Henderson to turn the music back on, but she stopped when she saw her husband's face. It wasn't the face of a man in love. It was the face of a man who realized he had been swindled. "Show me, Meredith," Fitzpatrick hissed, snatching the phone from her son's hand. She read the screen. Her eyes darted back and forth, scanning the PDF. Her chest heaved. The aristocratic mask she wore so tightly slipped, and beneath it was the snarling face of a desperate, broke woman. He knew, she whispered. Her voice was trembling with rage. That dirty old man knew everything. She looked at Brittany. The look was pure hatred. "You lied to us," Meredith screamed. Her voice cracked through the silent tent, causing the remaining guests to jump. The senator, who was halfway to the exit, stopped and turned around, watching with morbid fascination. "You little fraud," Meredith yelled, throwing Jason's phone onto the table. It slid across the linen and crashed into a centerpiece. "You told us your father was holding the land for you. You told us he was a simpleton who would sign it over as a wedding gift." Brittany recoiled, confused and terrified. "I don't know what you're talking about. He is just being mean. He is throwing a tantrum because of the sign." "He isn't throwing a tantrum, you idiot. He is throwing us to the wolves," Meredith shrieked. "He sold the land. He sold it 6 months ago. There is no asset. There is no capital. You are worthless." The word hung in the air. Worthless. Brittany gasped, clutching her chest. "How dare you speak to me like that? I am your daughter-in-law. You are a liability," Meredith spat. "We only tolerated your lack of breeding because you came with a portfolio. We thought you were an investment. But you are just a bill, a very expensive bill that we cannot pay." Jason finally spoke. His voice was hollow, devoid of any emotion. "Is it true, Brittany? Did he sell the land?" "I don't know," Brittany sobbed. "He never tells me anything about his business. I thought he still had it. I promised the bank we could use it." "You promised the bank?" Jason laughed, a dry, manic sound. "You promised me. I took out loans based on your promise. I borrowed money from people who break legs based on your promise." He looked around the tent, at the empty tables, at the waiters standing guard over the wine, at the guests who were now recording the scene on their phones. "This is a joke," he muttered. "This whole thing is a joke." He looked at his father, Jason Sr., who was sitting in his chair looking gray and defeated. Dad, we have to go. We have to leave right now. Mr. Fitzpatrick nodded slowly, standing up on shaky legs. Yes, we must leave. The press will be here soon if we stay. Brittany stepped forward, reaching for Jason's arm. Where are you going? We have to fix this. We have to cut the cake. Jason pulled his arm away as if she were contagious. There is no cake, Brittany. There is no wedding. Look around you. Your father just foreclosed on us. But we are married, Brittany cried. We signed the papers this morning. Jason looked at her with cold, dead eyes. Then I will call a lawyer on Monday morning for an annulment. Fraud is grounds for annulment. And this whole relationship was a fraud. He turned his back on her. Meredith Fitzpatrick adjusted her shawl, lifting her chin, in a pathetic attempt to regain her dignity. She looked at the guests who were still watching. This event is cancelled, she announced, her voice wavering. We have been deceived by the bride's family. We are the victims here. Come, Jason. They began to walk toward the exit. The groom, his mother, and his father leaving the bride standing alone in the center of the dance floor. Brittany stood there paralyzed. She watched them walk away. She watched the man she had spent 3 years chasing, the man she had stolen from her own father to impress, simply walk out on her because the check bounced. Jason, she whispered. He didn't look back. He walked past the senator who looked at him with undisguised contempt. He walked past the investors who were already making calls to pull their money from his non-existent funds. He walked out of the tent and down the hill toward the parking lot. The guests didn't wait for an invitation. As soon as the groom left, the floodgates opened. The senator was the first to move briskly, walking toward the exit, flanked by his security detail. He didn't look at Brittany. He looked like a man who was afraid of being associated with a scandal. Then the rest followed. The socialites, the influencers, the friends Brittany had cultivated so carefully to build her image, they all turned their backs. Nobody came to comfort her. Nobody offered to help. They just grabbed their purses and left their heels clicking on the hardwood floor, a stampede of rats fleeing a sinking ship. Within 5 minutes, the tent was empty of guests. Brittany was alone. She stood in the middle of the empty room, surrounded by thousands of dollars of flowers that were already starting to wilt in the heat. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of the wind flapping the canvas of the tent. She looked like a broken doll. Her expensive dress was stained with water and dirt. Her makeup was running. She looked around, desperate for anyone to validate her existence. But I wasn't done yet. As Brittany turned to run after Jason to beg him to come back, she found her path blocked. It wasn't Henderson this time. It was a woman named Maria, the owner of the floral company that had provided the 50,000 orchids. Maria was a tough woman who ran a tight business, and she had been watching the scene unfold from the service entrance. "Excuse me, Mrs. Fitzpatrick," Maria said, crossing her arms. Brittany stopped blinking through her tears. "I need to go. My husband is leaving." "He is not your husband anymore, honey," Maria said bluntly. "And you are not going anywhere." "What do you mean?" Brittany asked, trying to step around her. Maria stepped sideways, blocking her again. Behind Maria, 2 large men who worked for the rental company stepped forward. They didn't look friendly. "I mean, there is an outstanding balance on the floral arrangements and the decor," Maria said, pulling a crumpled invoice from her pocket. "Mr. Henderson told us the main venue bill was the owner's problem, but the flowers?" "The flowers are a third-party vendor. That is me, and my contract is with you directly." "Brittany, I don't have my purse," Brittany stammered. "Jason has the cards." "Jason just drove away," Maria said, pointing down the hill where the taillights of the Fitzpatrick's Bentley were disappearing through the gate. "He isn't paying." "Then send me a bill," Brittany snapped, trying to summon the last shreds of her entitlement. "I will pay it next week." "No," Maria said, shaking her head. "I saw what just happened. I saw the email your husband read. I saw his face. You don't have any money. You are broke. And I am not letting $20,000 of inventory walk out the door without payment. This is kidnapping, Brittany shrieked, looking around for help. There was no one. Only the waiters who were busy packing up the silverware, ignoring her completely. It is not kidnapping, Maria said calmly. It is collateral. You are wearing a dress that looks expensive. You have a ring on your finger. Brittany clutched her hand to her chest, covering the diamond ring Jason had given her. A ring I now suspected was bought on credit, or was a fake. You can't take my ring. I can call the sheriff, Maria said. I can have you arrested for theft of services. Is that what you want? Do you want to leave here in a police car? Brittany looked at the two large men behind Maria. She looked at the empty tent. She looked down the hill where her father's truck used to be parked. She realized for the first time in her life that there was no safety net. There was no daddy to call. There was no check coming to save her. She was a hostage to her own debt. I don't have $20,000, she whispered, sinking to the floor in a pile of white tulle. Then you better start calling people, Maria said relentlessly. Call your friends. Call your bridesmaids. Call anyone who has a credit card. Because you are not leaving this property until my account is settled. Brittany pulled her phone from her dress pocket. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely type. She dialed her maid of honor, a girl named Tiffany, who she had known since college. Tiffany, she sobbed. Tiffany, are you still in the parking lot? Please, I need help. I didn't hear Tiffany's response, but I saw Brittany's face fall. Tiffany had already left. Tiffany didn't want to be involved. She dialed another number, and another. Everyone was declining her calls. The toxicity of the Fitzpatrick's exit had tainted her. She was radioactive. She sat on the floor of the empty wedding tent, weeping. The waiters walked around her, stripping the linens from the tables, piling the chairs. They treated her like a piece of furniture, like a stain on the carpet that needed to be cleaned around. Henderson appeared from the office looking relieved but exhausted. He walked over to Maria. The police are on their way, he said quietly, but loud enough for Brittany to hear. The owner, Mr. Carter, instructed me to file a trespassing report if the premises weren't vacated by 1 p.m. It is 1:15. Brittany looked up, her eyes wide with terror. My father called the police on me. He is the owner, ma'am, Henderson said coldly. He has the right to remove unauthorized persons from his property. Brittany scrambled to her feet. She looked at Maria. Take the ring, she screamed, pulling the diamond off her finger and shoving it at the florist. Take the ring. It is worth $30,000. Just let me go. Maria took the ring. She held it up to the light, squinting. She pulled a jeweler's loop from her pocket. She had been in this business a long time and had seen plenty of fake brides. She examined the stone. She laughed. A harsh barking sound. This is cubic zirconia, honey, Maria said, tossing the ring back at Brittany. It bounced off her chest and rolled onto the floor. It is worth maybe $200. Your husband really played you. Brittany stared at the ring lying in the dust. The symbol of her marriage. The symbol of her elite life. It was fake. Just like Jason. Just like the Fitzpatricks. Just like her. She let out a wail that sounded like an animal in a trap. The sound of sirens cut through the air. Blue and red lights flashed against the white canvas of the tent. The sheriff had arrived. Henderson walked to the entrance to meet the deputies. Brittany looked for a back exit, but the rental staff blocked her path. You are going to wait for the officers, Maria said. We are going to file a report, and they are going to take your information, and you are going to sign a confession of debt. I watched it all in my mind's eye as I sat in Blackwood's office miles away. I knew the script. I knew how the world worked when you stripped away the money and the pretense. My daughter was about to learn that the only thing harder than getting into high society was getting out of debt. She was alone. She was humiliated. She was bankrupt. And the man she had banned from the gate was the only man who could have saved her. But he was eating a steak dinner in San Francisco, toasting to the silence of a phone that would never ring for her again. It was 9 o'clock at night when the headlights of the silver Bentley swept across my living room window. I didn't flinch. I was sitting in my favorite leather recliner, the one with the worn armrests where I had spent thousands of evenings reading blueprints and worrying about the future of the two people who were currently tearing up my lawn. I had a glass of bourbon in my hand, neat, and the lights in the house were off. The only illumination came from the bank of security monitors I had installed on the wall next to the fireplace 6 months ago. I knew they were coming. After the fiasco at the vineyard, after the guests fled, and the sheriff took a statement, but likely released Brittany on a citation, due to the sheer chaos of the scene, there was only one place they could go. They had no home. Their apartment was locked. Their credit cards were dead plastic. The Hamptons' house was boarded up. They were homing pigeons, and I was the coop. Or so they thought. I watched the screen. The Bentley, a leased vehicle that was probably hours away from being reported stolen by the dealership, skidded to a halt on my gravel driveway. The door flew open. Jason stepped out first. He looked like a man who had survived a shipwreck. His tuxedo jacket was gone, his white shirt was torn at the shoulder, and his face was a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. He didn't walk to the front door. He marched, his fists clenched, his movements jerky and erratic. Brittany followed him. She was still wearing the white dress, but the bottom 2 feet were brown with mud and dust. She had lost one of her heels and was limping, holding the expensive fabric up with one hand while clutching her phone with the other. She looked at the house not with nostalgia, but with a terrifying sense of ownership. She looked at it like a fortress she intended to conquer. They didn't knock. They pounded. The heavy oak door shuddered under the force of Jason's fists. "Open the door, Bill!" Jason screamed. His voice was muffled by the thick wood, but the external microphone on the porch camera picked it up crystal clear. I turned up the volume on the monitor. I wanted to hear every word. "Open the goddamn door. We know you're in there. We see your truck." I took a sip of bourbon. I watched Jason kick the bottom of the door. He was losing control. The desperation of a man who owes $3 million and has just been publicly eviscerated was a dangerous thing. Brittany joined in. "Daddy, open up, I have nowhere to go." "The police took my information. They are going to charge me. You have to fix this." I didn't move. I let them scream for 5 minutes. I let them exhaust their initial burst of adrenaline. I watched as the neighbors' porch lights flickered on down the street. I watched as Jason paced back and forth on the porch, running his hands through his hair, muttering curses. He looked like a trapped animal. Finally, I reached for the console on the side table. It was the control unit for the house's intercom system. I pressed the talk button. "Go away, Jason," I said. My voice boomed out of the speaker mounted above the door. It was loud, distorted slightly by the electronics, sounding like the voice of judgment itself. They both jumped. They looked up at the camera, their eyes wide, searching for me in the lens. "Bill," Jason yelled, staring directly into the camera. "You listen to me, you old son of a bitch. You ruined us today. You sent that email. You destroyed my credit. You destroyed my family's reputation. Your reputation was destroyed the moment you signed a loan you couldn't pay," I replied calmly into the mic. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see the wreckage. "We are going to sue you," Jason shrieked, spit flying from his mouth. "We are going to sue you for defamation, for breach of contract, for emotional distress." "With what money, Jason?" I asked. "Lawyers cost money. You don't even have enough for a motel room tonight. That is why you are here, isn't it? You didn't come to yell. You came to crash." Brittany pushed Jason aside. She pressed her face close to the camera. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes wild. "Daddy, stop this," she cried. "It's me. It's your daughter. I'm sorry about the sign. I'm sorry about the wedding. Okay, I apologized. Now open the door. We need to sleep. We need to figure out what to do next. There is nothing to figure out, Brittany, I said. You go your way, I go mine. That was the deal you made when you banned me. This is my house, she screamed, slamming her hand against the wood. This is my childhood home. Mom left this house to us. You can't lock me out of my own home. I leaned forward in my chair. Here it was. The entitlement. The belief that simply existing gave her the right to consume everything I had built. She thought this house was her safety net. She thought that no matter how badly she failed, she could always come back to the bedroom with the pink walls and the view of the garden. She thought this property was her birthright. She was wrong. You are mistaken, Brittany, I said, my voice ice cold. Your mother left this house to me, to her husband. And for 10 years I maintained it. I paid the taxes. I fixed the roof. I kept your room exactly the way you left it, waiting for you to visit. But you only visited when you needed a check. I live here, she insisted. I have rights. I am establishing residency right now. Open this door, or I will break a window. Jason picked up a decorative garden stone from the flower bed. He weighed it in his hand. He looked at the large bay window of the living room. Open it, Bill, Jason warned. Or I'm coming in. I need you to sign a check. I have people looking for me. Dangerous people. If I don't give them $10,000 by Monday morning, they are going to hurt me. You are going to write that check. He was threatening me. In my own driveway. He was going to use violence to extract the money he owed to loan sharks. Put the rock down, Jason, I said. You don't want to do that. I am doing it, he yelled, raising the stone. You are making a mistake, I said. You are trying to break into a house that doesn't belong to me. Jason froze. The rock hovered in the air. Brittany stopped pounding. What? Brittany whispered. I took another sip of bourbon. I savored the moment. This was the second bomb. The wedding was the Hiroshima. This was the Nagasaki. I don't own this house, Brittany, I said clearly. You're lying, she spat. You built this house. You've lived here for 40 years. I did, I agreed. Until 6 months ago. Remember when I noticed my credit card was missing? Remember when I found out someone had charged $5,000 at a luxury spa in Beverly Hills? She went silent. She remembered. She had denied it, of course. She blamed identity theft. But we both knew. I knew then that I couldn't trust you, I said. I knew that as I got older, you and Jason would try to take everything. You would try to declare me incompetent. You would try to seize my assets. So I liquidated. Liquidated. Jason lowered the rock slowly. I sold the house, Jason, I said. I sold it for $1. You sold it for $1, Brittany screamed. To who? Who did you give my inheritance to? To the Canine Rescue League of Greater Seattle, I said. The silence that followed was heavier than the silence at the wedding. They stared at the camera. They stared at the door. You gave my house to a dog shelter. Brittany whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. I transferred the deed 6 months ago, I explained. It is an irrevocable gift. The charity owns the land. They own the structure. I signed a lease agreement with them. I pay rent to live here until I die or move out. But I have no equity. I have no ownership. And I certainly have no authority to let trespassers move in. You are lying, Jason yelled. You are a sick old liar. Look at the mailbox, Jason, I said. Jason turned around. He walked to the mailbox at the end of the porch. He ripped it open. He pulled out a piece of mail I had left there intentionally. It was a newsletter addressed to Resident. The return address was the Canine Rescue League, and right below the house number on a small brass plaque I had screwed in last week were the words, Property of CRL. Future site of the Stray Rehabilitation Center. Jason dropped the mail. He looked at the house. He realized that the asset he thought was his safety net, the $500,000 of equity he planned to borrow against to pay off his sharks, was gone. It belonged to stray dogs. "You gave our inheritance to dogs," Brittany wailed, sinking to her knees on the dirty porch mat. "You hate me that much?" "I don't hate you, Brittany," I said. "I protected myself from you. There is a difference. You tried to eat the golden goose, but you forgot the goose can fly." Jason picked up the rock again. His eyes were wild. He didn't care about the dogs. He didn't care about the charity. He cared about the $10,000 he needed by Monday. He realized I was inside, and even if I didn't own the house, I still had the checkbook. "I don't care who owns the walls," Jason roared. "You are in there and you are going to pay me." He drew his arm back. "Jason, stop!" Brittany yelled, but it was too late. He hurled the stone. It smashed through the bay window with a deafening crash. Glass exploded inward, scattering across the hardwood floor, shards skittering all the way to my recliner. The cold night air rushed in. I didn't jump. I didn't run. I sat there, the wind blowing my hair, looking at the jagged hole in the glass. Jason reached through the broken pane and unlocked the window latch. He shoved the window up. He began to climb through, his face twisted into a snarl of pure malice. "You think you're smart, Bill?" Jason grunted as he pulled himself over the sill, cutting his hand on a piece of glass. "You think you can just cut us off? I am taking what is mine." He dropped into the living room. He stood up, breathing hard, blood dripping from his hand onto the carpet. He looked around the dark room until his eyes locked on me, sitting in the chair. "Write the check, Bill," he said, stepping toward me. I looked at him. I looked at the blood on the floor. I looked at my daughter, who was standing outside the window, watching her husband break into her father's home, doing nothing to stop him. I pressed the button on the remote in my other hand. Not the intercom button, the panic button. I had installed a silent alarm system connected directly to the private security firm that patrolled the neighborhood, a service I paid a premium for. But I had also done something else. I had called the police 10 minutes ago, the moment I saw their car turn onto the street. I told the dispatcher that I had intruders threatening violence. I told them I was an elderly man living alone, and I feared for my life. Sirens wailed in the distance. They were close. Very close. "You hear that, Jason?" I asked calmly. Jason froze. He tilted his head. The sound of the approaching sirens grew louder, filling the room through the broken window. "You called the cops," he whispered. "I did," I said. "And now you are standing in my living room uninvited with a broken window behind you and a weapon in your hand. That is home invasion, Jason. That is a felony. And since you are already under investigation for financial fraud, I don't think the judge is going to be very lenient." Jason looked at the window. He looked at me. He realized he was trapped. He turned to run, scrambling back toward the window, but blue and red lights suddenly flooded the front yard, blinding him. The police cruisers screeched into the driveway, blocking the Bentley. Officers spilled out, guns drawn. "Police, show me your hands!" Brittany screamed as an officer grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the window. Jason froze halfway out the window, caught in the spotlight like a rat. I took a final sip of my bourbon. The house might belong to the dogs, I thought, but the cage belongs to you, Jason. I stood up slowly, my knees creaking. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. I stepped out onto the porch to greet the officers. It was time to finish this. The wedding was a disaster. The marriage was a crime scene. And my daughter was about to learn that the only thing I was giving away today was a statement to the police. The garden stone was heavy granite, rough and cold, and as Jason weighed it in his hand, I could see the last flicker of humanity leaving his eyes. He wasn't a financial consultant anymore. He wasn't a husband or a son-in-law. He was a desperate man backed into a corner by his own greed, and he was looking at me not as a person, but as a pinata that he needed to break open to get the candy. I sat in my leather recliner, the glass of bourbon cool in my palm, and I didn't move a muscle. I watched him. I watched the way his chest heaved, the way his knuckles turned white around the stone, and the way he looked back at the darkness of the street, as if checking for the sharks he owed money to. He was terrified of them, but he should have been terrified of me. "Open the window," Bill Jason screamed, his voice cracking. "Open it, or I swear to God I will come in there and beat the check out of you." I took a slow, deliberate sip of the amber liquid. It burned pleasantly going down. I set the glass on the side table using a coaster, because even in a crisis manners matter. "You have 3 seconds to put that rock down, Jason," I said. My voice amplified by the intercom system calmly cutting through the night air. 1, 2. He didn't wait for 3. He pulled his arm back with a guttural roar and hurled the stone. The sound was explosive. The plate glass of the bay window didn't just break, it detonated. Shards of glass sprayed across the hardwood floor like diamond shrapnel, skittering under the furniture and pinging against the legs of my chair. The heavy stone thudded onto the rug, rolling to a stop just a few feet from my boots. The cold night wind rushed into the warm living room, carrying the scent of damp earth and Jason's expensive cologne. I didn't flinch. I didn't cover my face. I just brushed a small speck of glass off my trouser leg and looked up at the gaping hole in my home. Jason reached through the jagged opening, his sleeve tearing on a shard of glass. He fumbled for the latch, unlocked it, and shoved the window sash up with a violent bang. He vaulted over the sill, tumbling into the room with a lack of grace that would have been funny if he wasn't holding a piece of broken glass in his hand like a shank. He stood up, breathing hard. Blood was dripping from a cut on his palm, spotting the beige carpet. He looked wild. His tie was gone, his shirt was soaked in sweat, and his eyes were wide and manic. "You think this is a game?" he panted, stepping over the debris. "You think you can just cut me off?" "I have people coming for me, Bill. Serious people. I need $10,000 tonight. Write the check. Write." Pipton. He took another step toward me. I looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. He was threatening an old man in a recliner because he was too weak to face his own mistakes. "Jason," I said quietly, "you just committed a felony. This isn't a civil dispute anymore. This is home invasion. This is assault with a deadly weapon." "I don't care about the law," Jason yelled, spitting on my floor. "I care about my knees not getting broken. Write the check or I will break yours." He raised the shard of glass. I looked past him out the broken window. Brittany was standing in the yard, her hands over her mouth, her white dress glowing like a ghost in the moonlight. She was watching her husband threaten her father, and she wasn't doing a thing to stop it. She was waiting to see if he got the money. That was the final nail in the coffin of my fatherly love. She was an accomplice to her own inheritance being robbed. I picked up my bourbon glass again. "You are not going to break my knees, Jason," I said. "And you are not going to get a check. What you are going to get is a lesson in timing." "What are you talking about?" he snarled, lunging forward. I pointed a finger toward the front of the house. "Listen," I said. Jason froze. He tilted his head. At first there was only the sound of the wind whistling through the broken glass. But then rising above the wind came the sound of sirens. Not one, not two, but a chorus of them. They were close, they were loud, and they were coming for him. "You called them," he whispered, his face going pale. "I called them 10 minutes ago," I said, taking a sip. "When I saw your car turn onto the street, I knew you weren't coming to apologize. I told the dispatcher I had an intruder threatening my life. I told them I was armed." "You told them you were armed." Jason gasped, backing away. "I am," I said, tapping the side of my head. "I am armed with foresight, and police officers tend to be very aggressive when they think they are responding to an armed standoff involving a senior citizen. Jason looked at the window. He looked at the door. He looked at me. The fight drained out of him, instantly replaced by the terrifying clarity of a man who realizes his life is over. He turned to run, scrambling back toward the broken window, his shoes slipping on the glass. "Jason, run!" Brittany screamed from the yard. But it was too late. The room suddenly exploded with light. Blue and red strobes flashed through the broken window, blinding Jason, painting the walls in a chaotic disco of authority. Tires screeched on the gravel outside as 3 cruisers boxed in the Bentley. Car doors slammed. "Police, show me your hands. Come out with your hands up." The voices were amplified, loud and commanding. Jason froze halfway out the window, one leg inside, one leg out. He was caught in the spotlight like a raccoon in a garbage can. He looked back at me one last time. His eyes were begging. "Bill, tell them it was a misunderstanding," he pleaded. "Tell them I am family. Please. I can't go to jail." I looked at him. I looked at the blood on my carpet. I looked at the rock he had thrown. "Family knocks, Jason," I said. "Criminals break in." I didn't move to help him. I sat there and watched as 2 officers in tactical gear rushed the porch. They didn't ask him politely to step down. One officer grabbed Jason by the back of his belt, and the other grabbed his collar. They yanked him backward out of the window. I heard the thud of his body hitting the wooden deck of the porch. I heard the air leave his lungs. "Get on the ground. On the ground now." I heard the distinct metallic click of handcuffs ratcheting tight. I stood up slowly, my knees popping slightly. I set my glass down. I walked to the front door, unlocked the deadbolt, and opened it. The scene on my front lawn was a masterpiece of justice. Jason was face down on the porch deck, his expensive trousers torn, his face pressed against the wood. A female officer had her knee in the small of his back while she read him his rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Jason was sobbing. Not crying, sobbing. Great heaving gasps of air. "My life is over," he wailed. "My life is over." Down on the gravel driveway, another officer was dealing with Brittany. She wasn't in handcuffs yet, but she was being restrained. She was screaming at them, trying to use her entitlement as a shield. "Do you know who we are?" she yelled at the deputy. "This is my father's house. We are allowed to be here. That man on the porch is my husband. Let him go." The deputy, a large man who looked like he had no patience for socialites in ruined wedding dresses, held up a hand. "Ma'am, your husband just threw a brick through a window. The homeowner called us. Unless you want to join him in the back of the car, I suggest you lower your voice and step back." Brittany looked up and saw me standing in the doorway. "Daddy, tell them," she screamed. "Tell them it's okay. Tell them we are just fighting." I stepped out onto the porch. The cool air felt good. I looked at the officer holding Jason down. "Officer, is everyone safe?" I asked. "Yes, sir," the officer said, looking up. "Are you William Carter?" "I am." "Did this man break into your home?" "He did," I said clearly. "He threw a granite stone through my living room window. He entered the dwelling. He threatened me with physical violence and demanded money. He was holding a shard of glass as a weapon." "That is a lie," Jason screamed from the floor, his face squashed against the planks. "I didn't threaten you. I just wanted to talk. The stone in my living room says otherwise," I said to the officer. "And I have security cameras inside and out. Everything is recorded, audio and video. You will hear him threaten to break my knees." The officer looked down at Jason. "Well, that makes our job easy. You are under arrest for home invasion assault with a deadly weapon burglary and criminal mischief." Jason let out a low moan of despair. The officer hauled him to his feet. Jason couldn't stand straight. He looked at me, his eyes red and swollen. "Bill, please. I have debts. They will kill me in prison." Then you should have thought about that before you tried to rob me, I said. They dragged him down the steps. He stumbled, his feet dragging through the gravel past his leased Bentley, past my old truck toward the back of the police cruiser. Brittany ran toward him, reaching out, but the deputy blocked her. "Jason," she cried. Brittany, Jason yelled as they shoved him into the back seat. "Call my mother. Get the lawyer." Brittany turned to me. She walked up the steps, her face a mask of tragedy. She stopped 3 feet away. She looked at the broken window. She looked at the police. "How could you?" she whispered. "He is your family. You just sent him to prison." "He sent himself to prison, Brittany," I said. "I just opened the door." "You are a monster," she hissed. "You planned this. You wanted this to happen." "I wanted a peaceful retirement," I corrected her. "I wanted a daughter who loved me. I wanted to walk you down the aisle. Instead, I got a sign on a gate and a rock through my window." "I am going to fix this," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "I am going to get the best lawyer in the city. We will sue you for everything. We will take the house back. We will prove you are incompetent." I laughed. It was a dry, dark sound. "With what money, Brittany?" I asked. "You have no money. Jason has no money. His parents have no money. And as of today, you have no father." I pulled my phone from my pocket. "By the way," I said, "I think you should know. I pressed charges, not just for the break-in. I spoke to my lawyer an hour ago. We are filing charges for the $50,000 you stole from my retirement fund. That is elder financial abuse, Brittany. That is a felony too." Her eyes went wide. "You wouldn't." "I already did," I said. "The police will probably want to take a statement from you about your involvement in tonight's activities. And once they see the bank records, well, I hope you like orange. It is not really your color, but you will get used to it." The deputy walked up the steps. "Mr. Carter, we need a statement from you, and we need to secure the video footage." "Of course, officer," I said, stepping aside. "Come in. Sorry about the mess." I looked at Brittany one last time. "Go home, Brittany," I said. "Oh, wait. You don't have one." I turned my back on her and walked into my house, leaving her standing alone on the porch in the dark, while the police lights flashed across her ruined wedding dress. She was watching her husband being driven away in a kitcoach. She was watching her future dissolve, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. I poured myself another bourbon. I sat down in my chair amidst the broken glass, and I began to tell the officer the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The night was still young, and I had a lot to say. The flashing lights of the police cruiser bathed the front yard in a rhythmic, disorienting pulse of red and blue. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp grass and the metallic tang of adrenaline that still hung heavy in the air. I stood on the porch, the wood cool beneath my boots, watching as the officers secured Jason in the back of the first squad car. He was slumped against the window, his forehead pressed against the glass, a portrait of utter defeat. But my business wasn't with him anymore. It was with the woman standing near the second cruiser, shivering in her ruined wedding dress. Brittany looked small. The grandiosity that had fueled her rage just minutes ago had evaporated, leaving behind a frightened child who had finally realized the game was over. An officer was speaking to her quietly, taking notes, but her eyes were fixed on me. They were wide, brimming with tears that cut tracks through the layer of dust on her cheeks. I walked down the steps slowly. My knees ached, a reminder of my age and the years of labor that had built the life she had tried to steal. I stopped a few feet away from her. The officer stepped back slightly, giving us a moment, though his hand remained near his radio. "Daddy," she whispered. Her voice was thin, fragile. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted to be happy." I looked at her. I looked at the daughter I had raised, the girl I had taught to ride a bike, the woman I had walked to her first day of college, and I felt Nothing. The well of fatherly forgiveness that I had drawn from for 28 years was dry. It had been drained by lies, by theft, and finally by a laminated sign zip-tied to a gate. Happiness isn't something you steal. Brittany, I said, my voice low and steady. It isn't something you buy with someone else's retirement fund. And it certainly isn't something you build on a foundation of shame. I'm sorry, she sobbed, taking a step toward me. The officer put a hand out to stop her, but she ignored him, her eyes pleading with mine. I'm so sorry. I'll fix it. I'll pay you back. Every cent. Just tell them it was a mistake. Tell them not to arrest Jason. Tell them you invited us here. Please. If you do this, there is no going back. I reached into the back pocket of my jeans. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a check. It wasn't a legal document. It was the sign. The one I had torn off the gate at the vineyard before I drove away. The plastic lamination was crinkled, but the image was clear. My face in my gardening clothes. And the red letters. Strictly prohibited. I unfolded it and held it up. The police lights reflected off the plastic, making my own image flash in the darkness. Do you remember this? I asked. Brittany flinched as if I had slapped her. She looked away, unable to meet the eyes of the man in the photo, or the man standing in front of her. You made this, Brittany, I said. You sat down at a computer, you found the worst picture you could find of your father, and you typed these words. You printed it. You laminated it. You gave it to a security guard with instructions to treat me like a criminal. You didn't just ban me from a party. You banned me from your life. You decided that I wasn't good enough, that I was an embarrassment, that I was dirt. I didn't think you would see it, she stammered. That makes it worse, I said. You hoped I would just disappear. You hoped I would fade away so you could play princess with your rented friends. Well, Brittany, you got your wish. I stepped closer and pressed the sign into her trembling hands. She took it reflexively, her fingers clutching the plastic edge. Take it, I said. Keep it. Frame it. Put it on the wall of whatever apartment you end up in. Because this sign isn't for me anymore. It's for you. What do you mean? She whispered, looking down at the photo. I mean that the ban is mutual, I said. You set the rules. You drew the line. Do not let this man in. Okay, I'm out. But that means you are out too. You are prohibited from my house. You are prohibited from my bank account. You are prohibited from my life. Daddy, no, she cried, the sign crinkling in her grip. You can't do that. I'm your daughter. I had a daughter, I said, my voice cracking for the first time. I had a daughter who was kind, who was honest, who worked hard. I don't know who you are. You are a stranger who stole $50,000 from me. You are a stranger who watched her husband throw a rock through my window, and I don't let strangers into my home. The officer stepped forward then. Ma'am, we need you to come with us. We need a formal statement regarding the breaking and entering and the financial fraud allegations. Brittany looked at the officer, then back at me. Her face crumpled. The reality of her situation, the absolute finality of it, crashed down on her. She wasn't just in trouble. She was alone. Truly, completely alone. Please, she wailed, a sound of pure despair. Daddy, please, don't leave me like this. I turned around. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say I love you. I just turned my back on the weeping woman in the torn wedding dress and walked toward my front door. As I reached the porch steps, I heard the car door slam shut. I heard the engine rev. I didn't look back. I walked into my house, the broken glass crunching under my boots, and I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. And then, for good measure, I slid the heavy brass chain into place. The house was quiet. The wind still whistled through the broken window, but the screaming had stopped. I walked to the kitchen and poured the rest of my bourbon down the sink. I didn't need it anymore. I needed clarity. I needed to call Blackwood in the morning, and I needed to find a glazier to fix my window. I sat down at my kitchen table in the silence of my empty house, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel lonely. I felt safe. I had paid a high price for this peace, a price no father should ever have to pay. But as I looked around at the walls I had built at the home I had defended, I knew it was worth it. The sign was gone from the gate, but the message remained, and this time it was strictly enforced. The sun over Puget Sound was a blinding white disk, reflecting off the water like a million scattered diamonds. I sat in the stern of my 40-foot fishing boat, the Contractor, a name I chose to remind myself of where I came from. The line of my fishing rod dipped rhythmically with the gentle swell of the waves. It was quiet out here. No sirens, no screaming, just the cry of seagulls and the low hum of the outboard motor idling in neutral. It has been exactly 365 days since the wedding that wasn't. I reeled in my line, checking the bait. It was gone. A clever fish had stolen it without me noticing. I smiled. Sometimes you lose the bait, but you keep the hook. That was a lesson life had taught me well. I reached into the cooler beside me, not for a bourbon, but for a bottle of sparkling water. My doctor had told me to cut back on the hard stuff, and for the first time in my life, I was listening. I had a lot of living left to do, and I wanted to be awake for all of it. My phone, which was sitting on the tackle box, vibrated. It was a call from a number I didn't recognize. The area code was from upstate New York. I knew that area code. It was the location of the Federal Correctional Facility where Jason Fitzpatrick was currently serving a 5-year sentence for wire fraud, embezzlement, and grand larceny. The investigation I started that night had unraveled a Ponzi scheme he had been running to fund his lifestyle. He had stolen from his clients, his friends, and finally he had tried to steal from me. I picked up the phone. I looked at the screen. I didn't answer. I simply pressed the side button, silencing the ring, and tossed the phone onto the padded seat. I didn't need to hear his apologies. I didn't need to hear him beg for money for the commissary. I had heard enough from Jason Fitzpatrick to last a lifetime. His parents hadn't fared much better. Meredith and Jason Sr. had lost everything. The Hamptons house was foreclosed. The Bentley was repossessed. Last I heard, they were living in a 2-bedroom condo in New Jersey, dodging process servers and trying to sell their story to tabloid magazines. But nobody wanted to buy a story about rich people who were actually poor. It was too common. It was too pathetic. And Brittany. I cast my line back into the water, watching the sinker disappear into the deep blue. Brittany was working double shifts at a diner in Sacramento. I knew this because my private investigator checked in on her once a month. I didn't contact her. I didn't send money. But I watched. I watched as she traded her designer dresses for an apron. I watched as she moved into a studio apartment she paid for with her own tips. I watched as she learned for the first time in 28 years what $1 actually cost. She had called me once 6 months ago on my birthday. She left a voicemail. She didn't ask for money. She didn't scream. She just said, "Happy birthday, Dad. I miss you." I saved the message. I listened to it sometimes when the nights got too quiet. But I didn't call back. Not yet. She was still learning, and I was still healing. The wound of seeing your own child treat you like garbage doesn't close overnight. It takes time. It takes distance. And sometimes, it takes silence. The rod tip bent sharply. A bite. A real one this time. I grabbed the rod, setting the hook with a sharp jerk of my wrist. The reel screamed as the fish ran, taking line. It was a fighter. Good. I like to fight. I fought the fish for 10 minutes, my muscles burning, the old familiar ache of physical exertion, grounding me in the moment. When I finally brought it to the surface, it was a beautiful king salmon shimmering silver and green in the sunlight. It was a trophy fish. I reached down with the net and scooped it up. I looked at it for a moment, admiring its strength, its struggle. Then I reached into the net, unhooked it, and lowered it back into the water. "Go on," I whispered. "You earned it." The fish flicked its tail and disappeared into the depths free. I sat back, wiping my hands on a rag. I looked out at the horizon where the mountains met the sea. I was alone on this boat. I was alone in my house, which I still rented from the dogs. I was alone in my life. But I wasn't lonely. Loneliness is the feeling that something is missing. Solitude is the feeling that nothing is missing. And sitting here with the sun on my face and the truth in my heart, I knew I had everything I needed. I had my dignity. I had my peace. And I had the absolute certainty that I would never again let anyone make me feel small. I picked up my phone again. I deleted the missed call from the prison. Then I opened my contacts and scrolled down to Brittany's number. I hovered my finger over the call button. Not today. But maybe soon. Maybe when she had built something of her own, something real. Maybe then we could talk. Not as a bank and a client, but as a father and a daughter who both learned the hard way that respect is the only currency that matters. I put the phone away. I started the engine. The boat rumbled to life, turning toward the harbor. The wedding was a year ago. The marriage was a ghost. But the man in the truck, he was still here. And he was just getting started. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you think I should call Brittany or if she still has more to learn. And remember, never let anyone ban you from your own life. You built it. You own it. And you have the right to close the gate whenever you want. Until next time, take care of yourselves and don't take any wooden nickels. This story serves as a powerful reminder that we teach people how to treat us, even our own children. For years, I believed that love meant giving without limits. But I learned the hard way that generosity without boundaries only breeds entitlement. True family isn't defined by blood or DNA, but by mutual respect and loyalty. It is never too late to reclaim your dignity, even if it means walking alone for a while. If you find yourself giving everything to people who offer nothing but disdain, in return, remember that the most valuable asset you own isn't your bank account. It is your self-respect. If you agree that respect is non-negotiable, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice and redemption.